Hi everyone, Michael here from Mirrors of Consciousness and creator of the Orbifold Tarot. One of the things that I love doing with the Orbifold is using specific cards to inspire spreads and spread positions. Sometimes using the same number of cards as in the inspiration card, and other times using the elements or just the general idea of that card. In this case, I thought it would be helpful and timely to do a spread based on the events of this week, the recent US elections. I think we can all pretty much agree that no matter which side of the situation you were on, if you had a side, the whole thing is very tower-like and will probably continue to be so for a little while to come. And also what I think we can all agree on, no matter which side you were on and still are on as well, is that really at the end of the day we all just hope for the best possible outcome. We may have very differing opinions on how that may come about and who might or might not be the best leader to take us into that best possible outcome. But really, at the end of the day, that's what we really want, is the best for us and our friends and our families and our countries. So keeping that in mind, I'm sure I don't need to remind everyone that in the numerical order of the major arcana in the tarot, immediately following the tower is the star. So immediately after the devastation that's caused by the tower, that's exemplified by the tower, the star is the chance to recollect and heal and release a lot of the stuff that was collected or created by the tower. And in a way it's a kind of a rebirth or a step on the way toward rebirth. And so with those kind of principles in mind, using as many cards as 16 and 17 is a bit much for one spread. So instead I've chosen to go with the elements. And so in the tower we have earth, the foundation, fire, the cause or the action that topples that foundation, and then air rising up through the middle as the result of that destruction. And then in the star we have the ring of water with a ring of earth, with a ring of water, with a ring of earth, and so it's a reintegration of our emotional state with the stability of our being. Of course, you know, many of you already know about the tower and the star in your own ways, and I've done individual videos on my take on those two cards, which I'll link up here in the video in the corner. But so we have all four elements are actually represented: earth, water, fire, and air. Earth, though, is the common element between the tower and the star, at least in my view, in the Orbifold Tarot. And so in the tower, the earth element, it represents the foundation that is being destroyed, whereas in the star, the earth element is the foundation that's being recovered. So those are going to be represented here on the left by the two leftmost cards. So here we have earth, the foundation that is currently being destroyed or being given up, or whatever the effect of that foundation is in the tower, in your particular tower case. Then here on the far right we have the fire, the action that's causing that destruction or causing that upheaval, and whatever efforts are being put into that upheaval, just to kind of get a perspective on it, and possibly the to some degree the desired outcome. We don't usually perform actions or put effort into things unless we desire something from that. The desire itself is like fire and is burning. The outcome that we desire is independent of the fire aspect. It's the result of the burning, but it is nonetheless very closely tied with the fire, or the inspiration, the initial reason for the fire to be there. And then in the center is the air quality. The air quality in this case being the revelation, the breakthrough, the new realization, the new consciousness that is revealed through the destruction of the existing foundation by the burning, the efforts and the actions toward that destruction. And then, so here, as I said, here's the second Earth card. This Earth card, though, is going to be, what is the new foundation? What are we now, what aspects of the old foundation will we rebuild? And what aspects of the new foundation do we want to embody that may be different from the old foundation? And getting to a little bit deeper level of Earth, what is the essence of our being that we can still take comfort in and find stability in, that continues even when Earth is destroyed? What aspect of that Earth element continues? And then here in the upper right we have the water aspect. And so the water aspect is, in this case, how can we heal, especially this week? How can we heal? How can we come together? What should we do emotionally? What is the emotional direction, and what is the emotional investment and task that we now have to take on, absorb, and express? Because of course the star, as she's pouring out her two jugs, she's expressing her emotions, she's releasing, and so that's also an aspect of that, of course. What do I need to release in order to move on from this whole situation? So that's kind of an overview of the spread positions. Of course, you can add your own little nuances to each of those positions, but that's just the general idea. So up here, across the top, these two cards are the star, and then these three cards on the bottom are the tower elements. Earth, fire, air, earth, water. And I drew them also in that order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just as a hypothetical or as a general reading, I haven't actually looked at these cards yet. I just set them out as placeholders. But I was thinking about the spread and the situation as I was shuffling. So we'll treat it like a real reading, and we'll make it a general reading for all of us who are watching. Temperance. That's interesting. Let's do number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. Wow. Some fun stuff in there. I'm actually going to pause for a second. Okay, so we have in this first foundational place, the foundation that's being uprooted is temperance, which is very interesting. I think there's been a long period of time where everything's been kind of very carefully measured and carefully balanced back and forth, and a lot of discussion back and forth, but there's also an element in that of some kind of tension and some kind of control in maintaining that balance. And balance, as we know, can be rather precarious. So even though a lot of times, especially kind of in spiritual circles, we're kind of talking about, oh, we always want balance, and like it's some kind of steady thing, when really balance is extremely precarious, and it's constantly in flux. But trying to hold balance is very difficult. And even once you find balance, once you strike a balance, that always shifts automatically. So trying to hold that perfect balance, that tempering, it can be difficult to maintain in the long run, in the long term. So then what's the inspiration? What's the fire? What's the impulse? What's the effort and the action that's causing this upheaval, this destruction of balance, destruction of temperance? That's the Ace of Air. So new ideas are being brought forth, or new ideas are wanting to be brought forth. And because of that kind of almost suppressive nature of temperance, which I think often we don't think of temperance as suppressive, but in a way it is. It's very measured and controlled, and there is a suppression involved in that careful measurement, and new ideas can't flourish in that control, in that measured way. And then in the center, in the air, in the New Revelations section, that's giving us a little bit idea. So it's interesting that we get an air card in a fire position and then a water card in an air position. So it kind of just also shows the flux that's going on, that we have actually no cards in the actual spread. We have no cards that are in their own elements position. So just on that aspect, it's indicative of the change that's presently going on there. So this new idea, though, this Ace of Air that's moving, it's actually moving, that agent of change is leading us toward, well, what is the new revelation? What is the new idea? And there's some kind of emotional tension. It's revealing the emotional tension that exists between all of the various kind of tribes of people that feel either unrecognized or misunderstood, or disenfranchised, or any combination of all those things, because usually all of that kind of goes together. And there's actually, in the sevens, there's kind of a bit of a separation between one harmony, the three, and a different harmony above, and then there's a central kind of agent within there that's separating the two. I often think of sevens as the leadership number, leadership and individuality, and breaking out of society, or breaking out of a certain cultural place and taking leadership. And there's no question that for the last 100 or 200 years, the United States have been the cultural leader, the global leader, but perhaps within the United States themselves, there is a sense of individual communities, different tribes of people. Many commentators on the election spoke about how it was a tribal election, or a tribal vote, that both candidates were doing a tribal strategy of trying to get this tribe to vote for them and that tribe to vote for them. And so there's a division among the tribes. That's no news to any of you if you've been alive and awake for the last couple of years, we've seen how that tribal tension is starting to boil over, and it's boiling over in a way that the tribes kind of are separating. They're coagulating and separating, and something new is. But I think even though I kind of jokingly say that it's been obvious, maybe it hasn't been obvious enough for certain people, certain tribes to recognize. Certain tribes have been saying, yes, we feel like outsiders, and other tribes have maybe been saying, no, nothing's wrong, when really it is. It really is. And so maybe it requires a little bit more separation, I dread to say, for that to be revealed, for that revelation to come about. And then I know some of you might seem a little bit upset to see the devil in this second earth, the new foundation pile, since many of us see the devil as typically a negative card, especially showing the darker aspects of all of us. And certainly there's an element of that, I get a feeling of an element of that in this reading, especially coming out of this separation of tribes. I'll actually get back to this. There, hopefully, in that air position, in the Seven of Water, that revelation position, hopefully the leader that comes forth out of all of that, and I kind of doubt it will be the president-elect, but maybe there will be some other figure that comes about who reaches people on an emotional level in such a way as to not disconnect them further, but instead to connect them further, connect all of us further, and take the community and lead it forward. Community is a great thing, and equality is a great thing. 3 people saying no and 3 people saying yes, then it's a stasis, it's a stalemate. Whereas we kind of need that odd, the 7, in order for some kind of direction or leadership. This is why I say leadership, but it's also direction to emerge, where 4 people can say no and 3 people say yes, or vice versa, 4 people yes and 3 people no, in order for a movement to occur, so there needs to be some kind of unevenness, not necessarily in the value of each person's say, but an unevenness in the total number of say, to separate out enough to find similarity among a majority. So, I mean, that's the democratic process. That's the voting process, is enough people divided in their opinions, but enough people coming together to provide their say, and with enough numbers, there's enough difference between one side and the other, no matter how close it may be, for one direction to emerge. Now, we can get into all kinds of discussions as to whether or not that was fair because of how many voters and and I don't really want to get into all of the nitty-gritties of the politics, but this is just to give a general idea. So maybe in that revelation position, we do have some kind of emotional leader, someone who can recognize the differences between people, and yet also bring people together, because I think that's also a part of the problem in terms of the quote-unquote tribal differentiation, of a divide between people, is that there's been some blindness, there's been some assumption that everything is equal when it's really not. And the assumption of equality, where equality is actually not present, is almost worse than admitting there is differences, and we have to unite under those differences. But not recognizing those differences kind of suppresses them and creates a bigger problem. And many of you have experienced that, where where people have said, no, there's no difference between black people and white people in the way that they're treated, when very clearly, of course, there is. There's no denying that fact. And so perhaps this division, this upheaval, this current situation is revealing that to the extent where the people who still don't believe that that divide exists, that inequality exists, they may start to see it for a change. And beyond that, then we have to recognize our differences, but that's not the last step. That recognition that there is inequality, that's just the first step towards creating a more true equality. And that does lead actually to this new foundation of the devil. I'll put a link there again also about these cards, about the devil and temperance. My view of the devil is largely breaking out of the norm, breaking out of societal constraints and societal norms. And the devil, the new base, is actually doing exactly that. And that idea of devil's advocate, people play devil's advocate just to create an argument. And it's not to create an argument. It can be taken very negatively, and some people who do that can play devil's advocate just to be difficult. But the value of devil's advocate style arguing is to show the other side, is to present the other side, and hopefully gain a broader perspective than the perspective that we have within our own little culture and our own little shell. And by our own little culture, I don't mean American culture or North American culture necessarily, although that's part of it, but even our smaller cultures, our friend and peer group or our workplace group creates its own culture. Each workplace has its own culture. Each peer group has its own culture. Each age group has its own culture, as we know. And so the devil, to me, as a new foundation to build from, actually represents that moving out of current cultural norms, larger cultures and smaller cultures, toward a bigger picture, and toward, to me, the devil is really the card of enlightenment, that we can't truly be enlightened as long as we are in our, not only our cultural norms, but also our conditioning. And so the new foundation is it doesn't sound so solid, but the new foundation is actually a breaking out of that conditioning on both sides, on all sides, not just both sides. There's many sides to this whole thing, but on all sides. And a lot of the cultural conditioning that is currently on display is that of defensiveness. So a lot of the ugliness of the whole situation is defensiveness, and I'm just as guilty of being defensive and reactive surrounding the issues on this as anybody else is. Some of us are a little bit more reactive than others, but we've all it's a reactive state. And so the new foundation is really going to be about recognizing reactivity and not having reactivity as our base, but recognize our reactivity and then taking a pause at reactivity, at our reactions, because reactions are a result of our conditioning. And taking a pause and going, okay, this is reactive behavior. This is my reaction. Can I let it kind of sink in, and can I respond in a more intelligent and respectful way, and in a more progressive way that doesn't further alienate other people, but rather brings them in. And so that's also tying into this new revelation. So maybe it's not about finding one leader, emotional leader, who stands apart from everyone, but rather a matter of all of us being our own leader in that sense, where we can be between two groups. And that, those two groups could be two groups that are not the group that we identify with, or one of them can be the group that we identify with, while at the same time we emotionally connect with the other group. And that's what builds community, which is exactly what we're getting to here in the water position, in the how do we heal, what's the emotional revelation, what's the way to reconnect with people emotionally in the water position. That's an earth, a three of earth. And earth, if I know some of you are going to be new to me with this video, but for those of you who've been following me along, earth to me is really the element of being. So three of earth is recognition of our being, and that at our root, even though we may be very different, culturally, economically, socially, one from each other, at our root, at our very being, we are the same. Beingness is universal. I know that sounds very kind of cliche, but that's in a sense what the three of earth itself is about, and the three of earth. So it's showing that there's three or more different beings as those three spheres, but at the same time they share one essence. I invite you to try this spread out for yourselves. Just a little side note, a few little side notes. These two cards, these are from the large version of the deck. These are the cards from my mini deck. I'm only saying that just because, so that you know that the Tower and the Star are still in this pack. If I turn it over, I can find. Well, I won't look for them, but they're in there somewhere. The Tower and the Star are in there. I assure you. Let's see, there's the star. So I only took these two out just to show you where the inspiration for the spread came from. You don't need to pull your Tower and your Star out of your deck. You can do it with any deck, any Tower and Star, but keep the Tower and the Star in the deck if you wish. You know, you can do it either way. I chose to keep them in here, but keep the Tower and the Star in the deck, because they may come up, and they may actually, in each individual position, may reveal interesting things. Another thing, side note, that I wanted to just look at, even though the Tower and the Star are still in this pack, and these were just kind of dummies, extras, it is very interesting to me that we go 14, 15, 16, 17. So there is a sense that beyond the spread, there's a continued movement through a tower-like state, and that the resolution is the star. So we're evolving in a way from temperance and the devil through the tower to the star. I think I'll leave it there. I probably have some other things, or some of you may have some other thoughts about this particular spread and the cards that came out. And I welcome your feedback. I will say, though, that although I welcome your feedback, I do not welcome discursive discussion about which candidate was better, and you know, what each person thinks about people who voted for whoever. I have those opinions too, but for this particular video and any of the comments written, I'd like to keep that out of it. Please just comment. I'll just delete them. I'm not going to respond. I'm just going to delete them. If you want to comment on feedback about the spread, especially because this particular spread, this is Hope After Devastation. So I hope I'm going to leave this video up. I hope that this spread is helpful to people who have just come through or are facing any kind of devastating situation. it's just that this current situation was the inspiration. So use the spread for hope after devastation, or how to move forward out of a devastating situation. And I welcome you to explore the spread on your own, maybe cast it for yourself individually, and maybe compare with how my generic reading went compared to your individual reading. That would be really interesting. So I hope to be back with more videos soon. Take care and have fun.